When Doctor Who came to an end in 1985, it made front-page news and led to sustained protest by the programme's many supporters. This year it came back with a new Doctor, and tomorrow it celebrates its 24th birthday. But it seems that some of its fans are still not happy.
There's too much light entertainment creeping into it, which has deviated from that drive towards good gothic drama.
The last 8 or 9 years have seen a very, very steep decline in the quality of the show, and it's become a sort of mockery pantomime version of its former self.
Oh, don't underestimate her. She's a brilliant but sterile mind. There's not one spark of decency in her.
I'm overwhelmed.
Oh,
Such superior diagnostic talents.
it's my 40.
Well, then it's a pity they can't be concentrated on the machine.
Press attention has focused on the new Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, but the programme's critics feel the problem goes deeper.
It's lost that which it once had very tangibly, and that is the ability to be, for the small screen, what Hammer Films were doing at their peak, for the widescreen. If you like, it's lost the ability to terrify, not terrify perhaps, but frighten children in a non-horrific way.
So, you are a Time Lord.
I renounced the Society of Time Lords. Now I'm simply a traveler.
In time and space. Time and space.
John Nathan Turner, the producer of Doctor Who, declined to appear on this programme, but in September he answered his critics on Open Air.
I think that quite often the memory cheats. I think that everybody who's ever watched the series has an era that is their favourite, whether it's the Patrick Troughton era or even the William Hartnell era. And I think that in a way, maybe 20 years later or 15 years later, I think the appreciation of it in retrospect is perhaps a little cloudy. Because at the same time, the viewers are aging.
I'm not being nostalgic at all, because being familiar with the old shows and comparing them, I think you can see that the first 4 Doctors, William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee and Tom Baker, they all had a wonderful eccentric charisma, and they had a standard of quality running through all their shows.
This works remarkably quickly, doesn't it?
Am I to pour some more?
No, thank you, Molly, but you can tell me what the date is.
The date?
But what is it about Doctor Who that leads to such impassioned debate?
Firstly, science fiction is a very popular genre within a literary mode. Secondly, Doctor Who is the only long-running science fiction series on television, so it's always going to have a strong bedrock of fans. But it's also a quite unique format in that it is almost formatless. I mean, apart from the fact that it has the TARDIS and the fact that it has the Doctor, it's possible within that particular structure to produce almost anything. They can produce adventure series, they can produce historical romances, they can produce gothic horror, they can produce comedies, they can produce almost anything, if you like, and the Doctor can transmute into almost anything or anybody. And therefore, it has a sort of winning format in the way that perhaps a soap doesn't.
I first got interested in Doctor Who when I was about 9 years old. I was sitting there in the lounge of my parents' old house, and they said there was a new programme. I remember looking in the paper, and we thought we'd all sit down and watch it, and from the opening title sequence, I remember being riveted.
There's only one way in and out of this yard. I should be here when you get back. I want to see your faces when you try to explain away your behaviour to a policeman.
Nevertheless, we're going to find one. Come on, Barbara.
What are you doing out there?
She is in there! Close the door, please! But, Barbara! What do you like?
Close the door, Susan.
I have seen every single Doctor Who episode that has ever been transmitted. There were actually a couple that I missed at the time when they were being actually on the air, but of course I've got them on video since then, so I am now in a position to say that I've seen every single one and missed nothing. And apart from getting a video collection together and having every Doctor Who apart from 118 episodes, which are missing and lost forever unless some private film collector turns up copies, we've got a pretty amazing collection of TV scripts from the series. A lot of original props, including sort of like a 5-foot servo robot from a Patrick Troughton episode, which is so big that we had to sort of half dismantle the cellar to get it down in there. A couple of hundred, you know, the old black and white film recordings, so I like to keep them on film. That way, if the video's damaged, the film is preserved. And a lot of sort of books from around the world, a lot of American magazines on the show, and a lot of British magazines like Doctor Who Bulletin, which examines the history of the show. The central essence of the Doctor's character is a kind of weird eccentric with a great love of humanity and of civilizations and of a sense of fair play and justice. A general sort of cosmic magician with sort of magical qualities.
Historical background for Doctor Who is very interesting in that it comes into being in the early 60s. And it comes into being at a time when there is the new drive towards scientific understanding, the space race between America and the Soviet Union. But there certainly seem to be connections with the Eagle comic of the 50s. And Doctor Who would seem to take over fairly directly from that sort of comic. At the same time, it's more complicated than that. There are certain traditions that they share. They share a tradition of, on the one hand, that's sort of new scientificism. On the other hand, they also share a certain moralism. The sort of deep pacifism that runs through Doctor Who would seem to be part and parcel of the sort of the BBC's own very, very liberal, in some ways rather Christian values that it embodied at that stage.
The essence of a Doctor Who is what each actor brings to the role himself, and also how that's then qualified by the sorts of programmes that each individual producer then wants. As well as that, the performance has to have a credibility, because one of Doctor Who's strengths has been a sort of liberal moral passion. William Hartnell brought to the programme a sort of grandfather figure, and he was also a teacher. And what the BBC were looking for at the time, it seemed, was something which would encourage children to take a more positive attitude to learning. Patrick Troughton brought more whimsy to the programme. He didn't want to play himself, and in that respect what he did was he produced a performance, and it was much more comedic. He was much more of a dotty uncle to Hartnell's rather grumpy grandfather figure. Jon Pertwee had a fascination as Jon Pertwee the actor with high technology in the form of a variety of different types of transport. He was much more of a James Bond type figure. Tom Baker was a much quieter performance. You'd think about what Pertwee was going to do next. You'd think of what Baker was going to think about next, how he would think his way out of a situation. He was much more of a student, rebellious type figure, manifested in his sort of bohemian attire. Peter Davison was a way of making the Doctor very different to Baker, who'd been in the programme for so very long. The way he did this was to make the Doctor more vulnerable. But at the same time, it was difficult, I think, to perceive the Doctor as being somebody who could possess so much knowledge and experience, and someone who appeared so young. I'd like to think that Colin Baker didn't bring an awful lot of himself to the performance, because actually his Doctor was extremely unlikable. He was brash and arrogant, and had bad taste. And again, it's difficult to invest a lot of confidence in a figure who has such faults. The new Dr. Sylvester McCoy, he said in taking the role that he wants to make it like Magnus Pyke or David Bellamy, to make the performance such that it's somebody who's manically involved and enjoys everything he does.
As regards the long-term future of Doctor Who, Michael Grade, before he left us, said the jury was still out.
If they decided to scrap Doctor Who tomorrow, you'd lose the most flexible format that the BBC has ever had in the way of a drama series that can appeal both to the young and to the old. I think what you want to do is more to bring eyesight to the blind rather than take the guide dog outside and shoot it.